Well, thank you very much, and thanks everybody again for joining us today. Before we begin, just a short introduction. My name is Stephen Toole. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Avanan. With me is Michael Landaway, one of our co-founders here at Avanan. Just a little bit about the company before we get into the Cerber ransomware virus attack. Avanan is a cloud-based platform for cloud security. In short, what we do is we offer any security for any cloud. So whether you're using Office 365, as many of you are, I'm sure, or Google Mail, Google Apps, Amazon, Box, Salesforce, AWS, doesn't matter. Avanan can secure it all. And the beauty is that we can offer the full security stack because we've partnered with over 60 of the world's greatest security vendors to offer cloud-based versions of their most advanced technology. So this spans everything from malware prevention, data leak prevention, data sanitization, to encryption, endpoint compliance, and more. If you can think of a security product out there, we probably already have it on our platform, or we can add it for you and apply those security capabilities to whatever it is you're trying to secure in the cloud. So let's get to today's presentation. We're going to talk about the recent Office 365 ransomware attack as an example of, in general, how malware has become a real problem for Office 365 email and other SaaS applications. We definitely need to recognize Pasha Pal, technology leader of advanced host threat protection at Checkpoint Software, for his analysis of Cerber's behavior on the desktop, Checkpoint being one of our partners, of course. So what is Cerber? Cerber is ransomware, and it encrypts users' files both on their desktop and connected shares. It first popped up in around February of this year, and it has continued to recur in these burst-like attacks since then. It has grown to become the third largest threat of 2016 by sheer volume of its so-called market share or impact. What makes it really dangerous is that it's currently unbreakable. There is no known decryptor. So victims' only options are to either A, recover from their last backup, which hopefully was recently. You do all back up, don't you? Or option B, pay the ransom. Those are pretty much the only two options to get your files back. What makes this virus particularly notorious is that once it's encrypted everything, it taunts you with its own voice. Like something you'd see in a cheap Hollywood production. Only this is actually real.
Attention, attention, attention. Your documents, photos, databases, and other important files have been encrypted. Your documents, photos, databases, and other important files.
Okay, you get the idea. There's not much else to it than that, but still, I don't know about you, but I'd be pretty freaked out if that played on my laptop. So, shortly, what we're going to do is we're going to dig into the details of the June 22nd attack that recently made the news. If you were at the beach with your family that week, these are all the headlines that you missed. All of these, every one of these logos ran an article about the virus a couple of weeks ago. If you just Google Cerber ransomware, you'll see all these articles. But what really made it interesting was not the ransomware payload, this is a common attack, but because of who it targeted. This attack asked for $521 in Bitcoin. You got to think about why $521 and not $500 million or, you know, like Dr. Evil, $1 million. They know who their market was. Their market was SMB. You know, that's a reasonable amount to ask for to get your data back, unlike other targets that might go after large companies and ask for giant amounts of money. They knew that this is at a price that any user could probably put on a credit card and never let the boss know what happened. Like most malware, specifically targeted Windows users because it spread via a Word document. But really more interestingly is that it targeted subscribers to Office 365 SaaS email. And we think this is a really big trend that's worth investigating. It's most likely due to the recent growth in Office 365 adoption. Not only have we seen tremendous adoption growth for Office 365 over the past 3 years, it's absolutely eclipsing other SaaS applications such as Google Apps, AWS, Box, and Salesforce. So Suffice to say, there's a huge trend in Office 365 migration right now that's only accelerating. This is pretty significant because 92% of today's hacking incidents start with email. It is the gateway through which people are getting into your business. 13% of public companies are using cloud-based email right now. 1 in 10 are using either 365 or Gmail. But here's the striking fact. They're 3 times more likely to be victims of an attack. Now think about that. That's crazy. 13% are using it, but 36% are victims. So the bottom line is Office is growing fast and is an expanding trend for malware. Now, our friends in Redmond know this, and we love Microsoft, by the way, but they know that they need to stick to what they do best. I personally spoke to a product manager last month at Gartner Security Summit here in Washington, D.C., and she acknowledged that they stick to what they do best and they leave the rest up to those who specialize in those types of things, such as security. And these are her exact words. Really, all of this explains why any analysis of the Cerber attack is so interesting. I'm going to pass things over to Michael. He's going to go further into detail about how these guys got into Office 365, affecting potentially millions of users, and of course, why we're all here, how to stop them, how to prevent this from happening again in another month or 2 down the road. So, Michael, take it away.
Thank you, Stephen. There are a few things that were unique about the June 22nd attack that we thought were worth putting together into a webinar. We want to, first of all, look about how they got in and how it introduces some new trends, and then how to stop them. And there's no silver bullet. And in fact, because we know there's no silver bullet, we're going to look at the technologies we need to apply in order to stop them, because it is such a broad target. So let's look first at the June 22nd attack. It started out as a non-targeted email. Now, we've seen recent attacks in which the emails came from internal addresses. Those were very expensive attacks that were targeted with emails from an internal address to an internal address. And those usually asked for tens of thousands of dollars. This was much more generic, non-targeted emails, each of them different, but all of them were designed with one goal in mind, and that is to get the user to open the attached document. Now, I'm sure there's a tremendous amount of back-end A/B testing on what it causes people to open documents, but they send thousands of different versions of this, and obviously some work. Now, there are different versions of the attachment. Once somebody opens it, it's essentially a Microsoft document, and there's a couple of versions here, and I'm sure you've probably seen these in your own mailbox. Now, all these attachments, while different, obviously have one goal in mind, and that is to enable content. Now, if this were a zero-day attack, taking advantage of a zero-day vulnerability, like say an infected PDF, for example, there'd be nothing more to do to infect the user's desktop. This is a case which is much cheaper for the attacker. They don't need to buy a zero-day virus. They essentially are just hoping that a certain number of people will click on that enable content. Now, you've probably done a good job training your employees to be careful about documents like this, but what's interesting is that there was a recent CERT alert about the growth in macro-based malware. And there's actually a very good reason why there has been an increase. One, it's free for the attackers to use, but more importantly, there's been a change in the way Office warns the user about macro-enabled content. By default, back in Office 2007, the user would have to click on a button called Options to see more information about the security alert, about the macro-enabled document. And by default, if the user clicked OK or just hit Return, it would disable the content. Now, back in Office 2013, things have changed. So now the default button for a user to clear the warning is actually to enable content. And because of this change, there is a tremendous growth in our users inadvertently enabling the macro. So whether it's macro enabled or 0-day enabled, the success rate of email is huge. 30% of phishing messages were opened in a recent test done by Verizon, and 12% went on to click the malicious attachment. Now, obviously, a smaller percentage might actually enable that content, but if it's a 0-day attack, that 12% is enough to get at least 1 or 2 desktops in your environment infected, even with just a few dozen email. So once the user has opened that document, nothing happens. The user may see an empty document, close it, and move on. Now, a few hours later or a few days later, this is what they'll see. Every file will have been encrypted and their desktop changed. Now, a few things to notice about this is, one, the user has a list of personalized URLs to go to in order to pay the ransom, to make payment. And this is something that's common, much more common now. Rather than a single one, this is very customized. Each victim had a list of a half dozen unique URLs. So these are all very specific on a massive scale. Of course, when they clicked on it, it was actually personalized per language, and this is where they would pay the approximate $500 in order to decrypt their files. And unless they had a backup, this was the only option. So going back to this idea of unique attacks, each victim having a unique set of malware, this is actually something that we're seeing more and more of, and that is massive morphing malware, or what we call malware factories. The idea is that each individual file, email that goes out, is unique to the end user. So different text and a different version of the attachment. The reason it could bypass antivirus was that each one might require a unique signature in order to be detected. So once that file is downloaded, and we'll talk about how it gets through Office, it ends up in the user's desktop. Now that macro is actually very, very simple. It actually contains no real malware. The way it got the malware onto the desktop is that it downloaded a portion of a JPEG from a random point on the internet. So there was another malware factory creating unique versions of these JPEG files and just scattering them in different places. The macro would actually download that JPEG, in fact only a portion of that JPEG, which contained a bit of binary that when poured onto the desktop would become an executable. So because JPEGs are usually not scanned by perimeter boxes, this would be downloaded without incident to the desktop. And even if you are scanning every single JPEG coming into your network, there would be a different version of that JPEG for each user. So there's no guarantee that a signature would have worked had a JPEG been scanned. So the real malware is embedded in JPEG rather than in the macro, making it that much harder to find. So this is definitely a trend. These malware factories are pushing out viruses and infected files at a rate in which malware hashes are only seen for less than a minute. And so while we might have seen 100 million different versions a few years ago, now we are on our way to almost 1 billion different versions of malware scattered around the internet, aiming for your users' desktops. So let's talk about how this targeted Office 365. So first of all, it's very easy for an attacker to identify users of Office 365. This is simple as an MX lookup. In this case, given a list of a huge number of email addresses, they can identify those that are using Office 365. Now, why is this important? This becomes part of the malware writer's QA. It's actually very typical for an attacker to do traditional endpoint testing. They load up some devices with your traditional malware and a virus software and test their software against it. What's happening now, because Office 365, number one, is becoming more popular, it's possible to actually test against Office protections in the same way they would on a traditional desktop. So once they've tested malware, knowing that it will run on most Windows machines, they can actually test it against their own Office 365 account, even with their advanced threat protection. So the idea is that now no malware writer will send unless it's been tested against their provider. And what this means is that if they're sending through Office 365, for a period of time, they will have 100% access to the user's inbox. So back to the original infection, the malware factory sends through Office 365 until it's caught. In fact, in this version, there was actually a little bit of code that detected the different versions of antivirus that might be running on the desktop. Now, there are a couple reasons why they would do that. One, it might be that that software could detect it, but we think in this case, it was more likely that they did not want information about the attack to get back to Microsoft, expanding their window of opportunity. This explains why these attacks would happen over a day's period of time and then stop. So what I'd like to do is now talk about what it takes to prevent an attack like this. There are a couple things to notice. One, it's not possible to prevent this attack by your perimeter web gateway because the JPEG would download without incidents. It needs to be blocked either at the desktop, but by then it might be too late for zero-day attacks. More importantly, it needs to be blocked within Office 365 or Gmail or the other SaaS-based email. Now, the problem is, just like Microsoft desktops are pretty much all the same, now that Microsoft Office has become more ubiquitous, it's possible for the attacker to test their malware before it gets there. How do you protect against that? And what I'd like to do is actually now move on to the Avanan environment and explain how we use a combination of different malware protection tools to protect malware that might be trying to get through Office 365. Just a little introduction into how Avanan works. Avanan is a cloud-based platform in which we have partnered with multiple vendors to create cloud-based versions of their malware protection, as well as DLP and encryption and so on. But in this case, we run cloud-based versions of their tools and connect to Office 365 through an API. This is important for a couple of reasons. One, it's invisible to attackers. We are not a proxy or an MTA, so there's no way for the attacker to know what types of protection are now running on your Office 365 account. But more importantly, because we have so many different vendors and we're constantly adding new and next-gen tools, we're able to always be ready for the next attack. So what I'd like to do is actually show you a demo of that kind of protection. And the way I'm going to do that is actually to show a couple of real 365 accounts. Now, we're going to call these unprotected and protected. The, quote, unprotected Office 365 account actually will have Office's advanced threat protection. This is their sandboxing environment and additional tools that, for a little extra, does offer additional protection. And then we have what we call protected, and that is exactly the same type of environment, but this time using Avanan. What we're going to do is send malware to both of those and kind of show you what it looks like from the attacker as well as the victim's point of view. In short, we are going to connect a series of different security tools to, in this case, Office 365 Mail in order to add protection. So first, I'm going to show you a couple of mailboxes. This is the unprotected, and this is the protected account. The unprotected account is your typical Office 365 with advanced threat protection, and this is protected by Avanan. What I'm going to do test it actually by sending malware to both of these simultaneously. What I'm going to do is compose a new message and going to both the unprotected and protected accounts. And just like a malware writer, I'm going to call it an invoice, something that somebody might be able to open. So in this case, I'm going to attach a couple of files. Now, we actually have quite a few different versions. Those that I downloaded this morning, in fact, we can take a look at those and see that these are all different variants that are all trying to get the user to open the file. So I'm going to go ahead and attach both of these and kind of show you what it looks like from an attacker's point of view. Now you'll notice that I just tried to upload 2 files via Gmail to send. During that attempt, Google detected one of them as malware and not the other. So this is a very, very easy way for me to determine that, no, I'm not going to send this one. If Google knows about it, so will Office 365. Now I've sent those to both. And yes, it looks like it made it through. Yeah, so that's a piece of malware that made it directly through Microsoft's Advanced Protection. And then we look on the other side, protected by Avanan. And it looks like it's being currently scanned. And what's happening now is that it has been removed from my inbox. It's being scanned by Checkpoint, by Silence, by a handful of other tools. And now it has been scanned and then quarantined because it is seen as infected. So from the user's perspective, they always know that kind of the status of the file, and while that file downloaded immediately through Outlook, it did not through Outlook protected by Avanan. So let's take a look at what's happening on Avanan's side. I'm going to show you at our security stack kind of what it looks like. In this case, we are connected to a number of different SaaS environments.
We're protecting these SaaS using 3 different malware technologies. Antivirus from Sophos, Checkpoint, OnLab, and Kaspersky. Malware sandboxing from Checkpoint and Palo Alto, as well as predictive malware protection from Silence.
We actually have quite a few other tools as well. Something to consider here is that a malware attacker might have the knowledge and intelligence to overcome 1 or 2 or 3 different malware vendors. But in this case, we are protecting using 3 different malware technologies. So traditional antivirus scanning, malware sandboxing, as well as this new generation predictive malware protection that uses artificial intelligence. So it would be a very rare writer that would be able to create malware that would be able to bypass those 3 different types of protection. This is what we mean by defense in depth. So let's go ahead and kind of look at the alerts. In this case, we can kind of see what actually happened on the back end. For this file, we can see that 3 of the antivirus actually let that file go. The predictive malware saw that it was suspicious, and then Checkpoint sandboxing actually identified it as threatening. In fact, we can go ahead and drill down to even see even more to kind of understand more about that piece of malware. What's nice is this level of detail in the malware report goes into probably more information that we'd need from a IT perspective, but actually gives you visualization of what's actually going on in the user's desktop and what was identified. So essentially what Avanan does is offer you the same level of protection, the same type of security stack that you would have in your own data center, but these are cloud-based versions, cloudified versions of those tools to protect the last hole when it comes to the attacker's way into your network, and that is through your cloud-based email. What is the solution to Cerber and other SaaS-based attacks? It's just like every other attack, layered defense. You must have protection on your desktop, you must have protection in your data center, and if you have decided to move to Office 365, Gmail, or any other cloud-based environment, you should have the same level of defense there. And while it's true that Microsoft is offering multiple layers of defense within their software, it has kind of the same unfortunate drawback that the Microsoft desktop has, and that is it's successful. And because it's successful, malware writers will write against it, so you must add additional layers on top of that. So the Avanan platform, we require no proxy, no appliance, and no agent. We are out of band and require only 10 minutes to deploy. Our goal is to provide you complete security, not only for Office 365, but also all of your SaaS. Thank you. Stephen?
Very cool, Michael. Thanks a lot. And of course, we've got more information on our website, avanan.com/trial. We do offer a 30-day trial of our platform if you're interested. Also, a chance to test out all these other security products at the same time. So it's like having your own test bench to have, several antivirus or other security tools and to be able to try them out side by side with a single interface. So that's pretty cool too. If you want to get on a one-on-one call with us, we'd be glad to do that. Do a live demo for the rest of your team. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and definitely please visit our website, avanan.com. By the way, we were named Gartner Cool Vendor for Security. Information Week just today named us one of the top 10 security companies to watch. So lots of we're getting a lot of attention out there. So definitely take a closer look. We'd love to work with you. Okay. Thanks a lot, Michael. Thanks everybody for joining us. Have a great day.